Hello and welcome. Andrew Petersen here for the final G'day Sharm El-Sheikh. And I'm coming to you from a very, very different pavilion at the WBCSD, We Mean Business Coalition conclave at the COP. Very, very different day to those over the last 2 weeks. Almost nobody is here. The negotiators are still very much involved in trying to eke out an outcome, and we'll get to that in a minute. But it's almost a case of the travelling caravan is definitely moving on. Almost every pavilion is now empty, but most critically, the coffee has shut down, which is very sad. So our wonderful Australian pavilion shut down late yesterday afternoon, and whilst the negotiations continue, and no doubt somehow coffee is being provided to our delegation and all of those here present, those in the observer status very much have to go and scrounge and find what little they can. In terms of the outcome, we're not quite sure, and largely because what's called the cover text or the cover decision really only landed yesterday, quite late in the piece. The COP presidency, in fact, released a set of dot points rather than necessarily a narrative about what this particular COP was going to end up being. And so that was actually met with some disdain by a number of negotiations, a number of parties. And what's yielded over the last couple of hours, certainly overnight, is a reformulation of that document. It's expected that there is, in fact, it may have been released already online. And the challenges become quite profound because a number of issues, which we'll get to in a minute when we look at the COP barometer, aren't necessarily where, I guess, parties thought they were going to be at this particular point in time. So let me just jump into our COP barometer, which unfortunately we haven't been able to show you by reason of the participation of our wonderful speakers over the last 2 weeks. But if I go firstly to the issues in relation to the cover text, overnight we saw that the references to 1.5 degrees goal and the net zero emissions by 2050 remains as text remains as language in that text. Now, why is that significant? Because at one point there were some parties wanting to have it out. Now, that's not good, not conducive to a shared understanding of where we needed to head towards, and certainly with the erosion of that kind of text, the ability for countries to backslide would become even more obvious and, dare one say, more profound over time. Interestingly, there is suggestions that there will be text in relation to human rights, to gender, possibly some conversation around multilateral development bank reform, which harks back to the first 2 weeks, in fact, the first 2 days of the COP, which were referred to during the high-level summit. An identification of the diversity of sources of financing, possibly phasing down of fossil fuel subsidies or use. You'll recall that there was the language in relation to phasing down coal in the Glasgow Pact, and there is strong indications that India is pressing for language in relation to other fossil fuels to also be in this text, but at this stage it appears that it has been removed. In terms of other areas of interest, RED Plus under Article 6.2, potentially language around nature-based solutions, which would obviously give a bridge to COP15, apologies for the flies, and also a recognition of the current status or this current crises facing large parts of the world in relation to energy and food, and therefore the importance of that in framing the cooperative approach that needs to be taken. We're also, I guess, and it's only right that it be in this text, that there be language in relation to the circumstances of Africa. And whilst that comes as no surprise given where we are, it is encouraging to see that there is a almost regional recognition emerging in these texts around what are the, not necessarily common but differentiated responsibilities, but what are the special needs of each region as we go forward. Particularly as, and you can see on the screen, this new potential new reference to a new country category. Right, why we need another one is beyond me, but it could be a reference to low-income countries. As I said, we've got this important reference to the 1.5 degrees Celsius target and references to science, so the IPC being hooked into that. At the moment, we know that there is language around the Glasgow coal phase down, but no mention of India's fossil, as I said, fossil fuel language, and a word spaghetti, as it's been called, to phase out and rationalise inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. If we look at some of the progress, if we can call it that, at this stage in relation to the main items at this COP, on the issue of adaptation, goal and also financing, I've got to also refer now to my phone because there's been an update in relation to this. We're seeing two issues remaining. That of the proposed framework, which in fact has progressed somewhat. The clean text is starting to emerge, and how it could actually inform the 2023 work program based on IPCC inputs does seem to be positive. There's also been, and I think that happened late last night, a commitment by the EU and potentially other countries to the doubling of adaptation financing to $40 billion by 2025, which obviously is well received. But the architecture or the mechanism in which that would happen is still open and up for debate. Interestingly, Article 6, which was thought to be a bit of a non-issue at this COP, has come kind of back to the fore, where language and draft text has been brought forward, which is starting to get quite, inverted commas, clean, meaning that nobody's disputing it. So countries apparently overnight are wanting to bring the language into the text of the final decision. The text is out as at this morning, Sharm El-Sheikh time, and we're waiting to see, I guess, all of those in the bingo pavilion from ICC, IATA, and in WBCSD, what it means for business. So very interesting that we will see quite possibly in as little as 12 hours and possibly as late as 36 hours, some outcome in relation to Article 6. Climate finance, well, the interesting development there, I think, is that Australia's in the room. And as you can see from my note, our own climate change minister, Minister Chris Bowen, is actually one of the co-facilitators of the work being done around climate finance. Now, what they're looking at is what's called a new collective quantified goal. And whilst the text has come forward, and could possibly be, as it says, a structured approach to further work on an ad hoc working program for 2023 to enable it to be put in place in 2024. It is, as was predicted last week, unlikely that there's going to be substantive new commitments around climate financing, although COP's not over yet. But more importantly, that there is a concerted effort to move on from the 100 billion a year as a largesse, as it were, and put it into a more structured framework. So we could expect to see at least something around the architecture of that in the final text as well. On the issue of losses and damage, the note that I have here is a little bit out of date, being that it's been welcomed onto the agenda, but there is no scope yet in relation to a deal. And in point of fact, as at this morning, it still remains in a holding item. There has been some language out that may indicate that it is going to be in the final text, which is positive, but as to what it looks like at this stage is a bit unknown. And then finally, we get to some related announcements. There is still, and we will at BCSD be documenting all of the bilateral announcements that have been made, as well as company announcements, individual country announcements, and tracking the announcements, particularly of Australia, around its pledge to join the 2030 deforestation ban, There's been no announcement by Australia on the Green Climate Fund at this stage. That was expected, but my intel tells me it probably now may not happen until 2023 at the very earliest. In fact, it may not be until 2024. And then finally, there was a meeting of those parties, including Australia, around the methane pledge, pardon for the flies, to discuss further plans for cutting those methane emissions. So I guess in summary, and one other point, there's still no inclusion of sectoral emissions, whether that's those of aviation sector or shipping and bunker fuels. There was some hope that they would actually be included in the text, but at this stage, it's not looking positive that there would be some link to that, which is a little regrettable, I have to say. All right, I think I've gone and canvassed all that I can. As at 9:11 a.m. in Sharm El-Sheikh, we don't have an outcome, and there is a sense that was given, or a signal that was given by the COP president, that the negotiating parties may actually be here until Sunday, which would actually make it one of the latest COPs ever to have gavelled a resolution into an outcome. Let's hope that is not the case, or if it is the case, then whatever comes from that is going to be good for planet, people, and prosperity. That really is all that there is to say at this point. Pardon me. A big thank you to the team back in Australia, particularly Lee Murray, and the great work that he's been doing in getting the message out there. Big thank you to all the speakers that we've had over the last 2 weeks. I can't name them individually off the top of my head right now, but they know who they are. Big thank you to our live audience, and also to our streamed audience, those who've jumped onto the YouTube channel and watched there. We hope you found it valuable. We hope you found it informative and sometimes a little bit entertaining. Don't forget that we're back on the road in the next 2 weeks at Montreal for the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, COP15. And once again, we will be bringing the G'day series to you from that particular COP, called, inventively enough, G'day Montreal. And you will find the registration up on our website now. But for now, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your participation and your engagement. Thanks for registering. And we'll see you, hopefully, at Montreal in the next couple of weeks. But if not, hope to see you back in Australia at the end of the year. I'm Andrew Petersen. Thanks for joining us. Bye for now.